At Kairos, we love to talk about how we have no quizzes and no tests. Does that actually work? Do we need quizzes and tests to be able to learn stuff? Let's talk about it. Welcome to Kairos Conversations. I am Ryan Martin, our New Testament Greek guy, and I'm here with Courtney Trotter, our resident Hebrew enthusiast. No matter your background, if you're someone who wants to dig deeper into the Bible, into the Old and New Testaments, we are here to help you explore, understand, discover the world of the Bible through the original languages. And today we are going to talk about our approach to language learning. What does Kairos do that might be different from a typical university or seminary setting? Courtney, can you talk to us just about Kairos distinctives, the way that we teach Greek and Hebrew?
Yeah, so we have some things that are unique to us, and we've thought long and hard about them. We've kind of built our backgrounds in how to teach languages best, and read a lot of this, and we've seen it bear fruit in our classrooms. And I could confidently say I think that my students are learning it better than I learned it, and I'm not, we're not cheapening the experience by taking away some of these things or emphasizing different things. That we are giving them a totally valid experience that allows them to come with expertise to the text once they've mastered Greek or Hebrew. And so, one of those main distinctives that's really unique to us is that we have no quizzes or tests. And this just seems shocking and is sometimes hard. Sometimes our students still want quizzes and tests, because they want to know that they're getting things wrong and where they can improve. But we've made this decision because we want to maximize our time for our students. Most of our students, they're working a full-time job, and this allows them to not stress about just memorizing certain answers, but doing more and more worked examples is the thing that we want them to do, to get them immersed into as many examples as we can get. And we have some ways that we will explain that later on as to why we do no tests and quizzes and how we kind of make up for that inside of our classroom. But there are other ways as teachers that we can gain feedback from our students to track their progress and see how we can modify our teaching that are not just quizzes and tests, but are actually more interactive in the classroom environment. And so we don't do quizzes or tests. So if you're wondering, am I going to be having to study all night to pass this test tomorrow? We don't do that. One of the other unique things that we do here at Kairos is that we don't call on students. And this is from a teacher's perspective, just
What?
earth shattering. I don't give quizzes, I don't give tests, and I don't call on students. And whenever we're hiring new teachers, this is kind of hard to get their minds around it. It's again, how am I going to know what my students know? And the best way that we try to do that is to create this safe and enjoyable environment where we allow for participation. And so instead of calling directly on one student, we allow them the opportunity to ask us questions. And so by asking us questions, they're telling us what they don't know. They can point to the example in the homework that they're struggling with. And we walk through that together. And so we allow them to identify their areas of weaknesses instead of just directly calling on them. Because a lot of times there's this psychological thing that happens whenever you directly call on somebody. And this happens to me sometimes. You directly call on me and I actually know the answer. I actually got it right in my homework. But I have this moment of ugh, where I'm just taken aback because I didn't know I was about to be called on. And so in that moment, I experienced this doubt or this inability to answer correctly. Whereas if it's participated in a dialogue in that learning environment where it's enjoyable and we're just talking about Hebrew or talking about Greek, then I actually can bring my expertise, even if my expertise is I got it wrong, right? It's my expertise in my own learning where I knew where I got it wrong instead of just being directly called upon and put on the spot.
I have so many memories from Greek and Hebrew class in my own university seminary experience. As wonderful as it was, of just being called on and you freeze. It's man, if all my friends weren't watching me right now, I could answer this. No, we're just asking
Right.
the question is that the best? Is that the best way to assess our students for where they are? And is that the best environment for learning that we want to make for our students? So yeah, that's really helpful.
Right. And if you're participating in a dialogue, you're mentally engaged the entire time. Whereas when you're being called on, you're wondering, am I going to be the next one I'm called on? And so you might not be engaged on what's being taught because you're worried about whether or not you're going to be called on. So it keeps you mentally engaged, again, to where you can always ask a question and always be okay to get it wrong, because getting it wrong is your own expertise of your evaluating your own learning progress. And that's never a bad thing. So there are definitely pushbacks that we could have to this
Mhm.
model, like from people who work in pedagogy a lot, and what is the best way to teach new information. So Ryan, one of these pushbacks, I'm going to flip this over to you, is like there's no accountability in this model, right? So how do we answer the no accountability?
Yeah, if we don't scare people into learning, they're not gonna learn anything, right? I mean, I know nobody would say it like that, but I think sometimes when people are talking to me, like, "Well, what if there's no quizzes and no tests? How are people gonna, like, do their work?" And my answer is because they want to. Like, because
Hmm.
they're interested in this and because they want to get better. There is a certain amount of, like, healthy social pressure in doing this as a group, which all of our classes are group classes, and there is a good accountability in knowing, like, "All right, I gotta, like, do my stuff and show up to class, just because I wanna be able to participate at the highest level." But we don't have to as teachers, in this setting, create the stakes. The stakes are already high because students are already investing their own time and energy into this, and they want to learn the language, right? It's one of the blessings of being in the Kairos kind of ecosystem is that all of our students, all of our teachers really like this. Like, we want to learn it. So we don't need things like quizzes and tests and passing and failing to create motivation for students. Our students are motivated because they want to be able to read their New Testament in Greek. They want to be able to read their Old Testament in Hebrew. And by keeping this class environment really safe, then students engage and learn more.
Right. And then one of the other pushbacks that we often will get is that it's devaluing the material if we don't give quizzes or tests or call on students, because it kind of says that, we're taking a more lackadaisical approach to learning Greek or learning Hebrew that maybe isn't as serious as what you would get in a seminary or university setting.
Yeah, right? Like, if we're not having tests and quizzes, are you really learning it? Are you really like, don't you have to pay your dues, put in your time, like just check those, learn, suffer to be able to learn. And I just like any pedagogical research in like nobody outside of like an individual classroom environment or a teacher who wants to exercise this kind of control, like nobody thinks that people learn best that way. That's just not it's nobody thinks that. Yet I feel like
Right.
our academic environment has given us this idea that like, oh, to learn something you have to suffer. You have to and again, like it's learning a language and learning a language is hard. And there's barriers and there's things that have to be overcome. But we don't have to create those, right? Like we our goal is to be there as our students' guides and cheerleaders and encouragers to be like, hey, you can do this. Let me help you. Let me show you how. Not to push them in through make them jump through all these hoops that we had to jump through in a more traditional university environment. As good as that was, I mean, obviously, it worked for me. Here I am. What we want to do with Cairo is something of creating the environment where students are really fascinated by what they're learning and really interested in it. And we don't need things like quizzes and tests to kind of bait them into studying to make
Hmm.
them work.
Right. Yeah. It's about creating a value proposition instead of a scare proposition. Right.
Yes.
So, like, you see the value in digging deeper into learning Greek and understanding Greek or Hebrew instead of being scared into creating artificial barriers and feeling the fear of failure. And
Yeah.
so that's what we try to do is create that value proposition, because all of us like learn are intrinsic learners in some way, where we feel motivated to do something and become an expert at it, and so we've done it. And it's usually that type of learning that we prefer the most, and that we kind of geek out on, right? That's like nerd culture, geek culture, hobby culture is all about that intrinsic learning. And so that really is the best way, like you said, that all of the researchers say that is the best way that we learn is when we're actually interested and we are continually affirmed and encouraged to continue the process even when it's difficult, right? So I think those are some possible pushbacks, and this is just how we're trying to best teach it in a way that encourages that value centered learning.
Absolutely. And this is part of us working with our teachers, people that we hire to teach Greek and Hebrew classes with Kairos, like showing them how to create that value proposition, showing them how to create the class environment where students want to participate, they want to talk, they want to ask questions, they want to explore and discover. Yeah, that's what makes class fun and exciting. Really, really good. Well, let's
Right.
talk about, these are some pushbacks that I hope we've given sufficient answers for. Why does this actually work? Why does this kind of value proposition based, non-intimidating, no quizzes, no tests vision of what a class looks like? Why does this actually work, Courtney?
Right. Part of it we've already mentioned because we've said that students are already invested when they're coming to Kairos. They are doing this a little bit more in that hobby kind of way where this is something that they're normally adding on to their extra expertise. They might be a doctor or a teacher or a stay-at-home mom and they just like want to get good at Greek and Hebrew to help study their Bible better. So they already are approaching it in that way where they're very intrinsically motivated to become good at it and so that they can apply it in their everyday lives as they're studying and reading their Bible. But this can work even in a university or seminary setting because that's what they're there to do is they're there to learn from their Bible. And so you can create a value-centered learning environment as opposed to, again, creating barriers or false
Even if it
barriers
was an
to
environment
learning.
with quizzes and tests, like you could
Right.
create that kind of thing. And this is what we hope that more seminaries and universities more and more will do.
And also, another way that this actually works is that we avoid the shame shutdown. So, you may be like, if you're a gamer or somebody who's experienced this before, you've experienced the game that you've tried to play that gets so hard that you rage quit and you just like no longer play that game anymore at all. And so we're trying to avoid that in the classroom and those experiences of the shame, individual experiences of the shame shut down in the classroom. So that's why we don't call on specific students because if they feel like they don't know the answer, then they will shut down. And if you lose them for 5 to 10 minutes in the middle of a class, then you're losing that 5 to 10 minutes of really good instruction that actually could build their confidence. So we try to avoid the shame shutdown. And there are times, even whenever I tell my students, like, hey guys, if you're struggling with this homework and you realize like you're getting to that point where you've reached your shame shutdown limit in doing a homework, then just stop doing it and come to class and we'll do it together. Right. Because it is better for you to be built up in confidence with what you already know, because you already know so much more Hebrew than you knew 3 weeks ago. You're just reaching that limit. So avoid the shame shutdown. Like, let's stop calling on our students. Let's give them the freedom to know when like they've reached their limit and they just need extra guidance and extra help and extra support and help get them there. So we don't want our students to feel that balloon of anxiety filling up in the middle of class to where it just pops and they all of a sudden check out.
When you feel like, oh, I'm not doing good at this, I'm bad at this, like your brain just it is not in learning mode anymore. And
Right.
that's inevitable to a certain extent, but we as teachers want to avoid that as much as possible. And instead of calling on students where we're risking that, we're just inviting them and creating other ways to kind of assess where they are and answer their questions, and yeah, just creating that dialogical environment. Again, as Courtney said, we've seen this work. Like we do this, we've done this for years now, and we see that students really do love learning the language. I talk to students a lot about kind of this, what we call this like inductive and deductive cycle, how we learn stuff in class, then you go back and you explore and practice on your own. It's a little bit like when I change the alternator on my car. I'm not very mechanically minded. But I have YouTube and some tools, so I guess I can do anything, right? That's not true. But I did successfully change the alternator on my car. It just took a whole bunch of watching the YouTube video, going and getting under my hood and messing around with stuff and making mistakes, unbolting the air compressor instead of the alternator and then having to go back and put it back in, go and look at the video, go back to the car. And it's this cycle. Somebody's telling me what to do. And then I'm going and doing the thing. No test. There's no like, for me at that point, it didn't matter whether I did this, this afternoon or tomorrow morning. It was just like I wanted to get it done because I wanted the result. Just like our students want to learn Greek, right? But I was doing it just by having instruction and then going and messing around, right? Learning deductively and then learning inductively. And what's beautiful about this manner of student learning is that rather than intimidation or fear-based propositions of how to make sure they're getting stuff done, it's their curiosity, it's their excitement that's driving the engagement with the material. And when we're at our best as teachers, we are fostering that in our students. We're making them excited about the language, and we're sending them out just ready to like figure this out and to make mistakes. And they learn to see their mistakes as positive things, as opportunities to like better understand something than they did before. We don't just get rid of quizzes and tests as like a marketing ploy. It's not just like, hey, come do this the easy way. It's not that at all. It's like we really think that this is the best way to learn. And we've seen it. We've seen it happen. So, we're not lying to you when we say that. This really is something that works and really is something that our students really enjoy.
It is something that just kind of feeds that inner drive towards curiosity and discovery and making you excited about what you're learning is what we're trying to do. And it is exciting whenever you see these things like we talk about on our videos, like, oh, John Barclay is the one who first made this argument. But it's exciting when you can see it for yourself and see how he's making the argument from the Greek text, or see how someone like Michael Heiser is making an argument from the Hebrew text all on your own. It is exciting, and it just drives that curiosity as a learner. Those are the ways that we do it here at Kairos. Those are reasons why they're not, again, like Ryan said, just a marketing ploy, but they are a way to help drive mastery and expertise in Hebrew in a way that actually comports with the way that we as people actually do learn. Um, so yeah, Ryan, I think those are my final thoughts for the day.
Yeah. Well, we love what we do, if you can't tell.
Mhm.
And we're thankful. This is a good space to say I'm so thankful to our students that want to do this because they allow me to have like kind of the job of my dreams. I get to talk about the New Testament all day. Thanks for joining, watching us. If you have any questions about how things work at Kairos, ask them in the comments. We'll answer them. So if you're one of our students watching this, go down to the comments and answer those questions. Nothing comes as stronger or more interesting from somebody who's experiencing these things for themselves. So thank you for watching. Keep your eyes peeled for more Kairos conversations. We have these talks about Old and New Testament texts and the ways in which Greek and Hebrew help us to see them in fresh light. We'll see you next time on Kairos Conversations.